There's always something special about beating USC, but especially when Notre Dame just physically dominates them and imposes their will on the line of scrimmage. That's exactly what happened on Saturday night. And today, Luke Smith and I are going to share everything we liked and didn't like from Notre Dame's statement win over the Trojans.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome in. This is Locked On Irish, your daily home for Notre Dame football. My name is Tyler Wojciak and I'm the host. I graduated from Notre Dame in 2018. Now I'm a producer at Fox Sports and I've been covering the Irish since 2020. It is Tuesday, October 21st, and thank you for making this your first watch or listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. And be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel or follow along wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to send in your questions for this week's Friday mailbag. Yes, we're doing a mailbag even though it's a bye week. And as always, you can drop your questions in the YouTube comments or reach out to me on X at Locked On Irish or on Instagram at Locked On Irish Pod. Today, I'm joined once again by my good friend Luke Smith for our weekly post-game tradition, the three things we liked and didn't like from Notre Dame's game on Saturday. Both of us were in South Bend for the win over USC, so we're going to start with our boots on the ground report. Then we're going to dive into the good. Jeremiyah Love and Jadarian Price carving their names into rivalry lore, Chris Ash's defensive adjustments, and the offensive line finally playing up to its potential. And of course, we'll close it out with what needs work, from red zone play calling to the kicking situation and everything in between. Let's get into it. All right, Luke Smith is here, and this man has just endured a hellacious travel day. And on Saturday, he was outside in the pouring rain and intense wind, but you know what? He seems like he's in good spirits because Notre Dame beat USC 34-24. Do I have that right?
That's correct. That's been the last 72 hours, and that's what's been keeping everybody afloat and everybody in good spirits. 'Cause I don't think you had a great travel day yesterday either. So that's what's keeping it all up and positive.
Getting out of O'Hare is an absolute nightmare. But look, we're still in a good mood, despite the fact that you're actually recording live from a hotel in the middle of Times Square late at night, but nothing can faze us because that's what happens when Notre Dame beats USC. Now, if the Irish had lost, we'd probably be in much different shape. I don't even know if we'd be able to record this podcast right now.
I'm going to be honest. I don't think this show would be happening right now if that had been the case, but it's not. And thankfully we have a lot of good things to talk about because Saturday night with all the elements and everything was really an all-timer.
Exactly. The show must go on, and normally it's just you giving a boots on the ground report. I've already talked about my experience a little bit on the show, but we've obviously kind of talked to each other about what it was like. We were there spending time together, but now that some time has passed, how are you going to remember the full day? Not just the game, but the lead up and all the uncertainty about whether the game was actually going to happen. But then it was actually a nice day for most of it. Then the thunderstorm comes out of nowhere. So a lot of highs and lows for us trying to endure the conditions. But what do you look back on?
Yeah, it was pretty mentally draining, honestly, because Friday was super nice too. And Friday was another really fun day. Got to spend some time at the linebacker Friday night and met some listeners of the show, which is always a treat. Always enjoy doing that, seeing people that are engaging with this product. But Saturday, you just kind of saw this storm that was supposed to roll in, and you started to hear, oh, this game might not happen, which really, I think for a while made the tailgating kind of not very fun because you're thinking this game is not really going to happen. And I actually think it turned a little bit when it finally did start storming, because for about an hour there, it was the darkest, most menacing sky you've ever seen. There's lightning, but I'm looking around at the tailgate lots and I'm seeing people just dancing in the rain. They're having a great time, just kind of embracing it. And at that point, I was kind of like, you know what, screw this. Like, I don't know if the game's going to happen or not. I'm not going to let this stop me from having a good time. And that kind of changed my attitude on Saturday. And then you started to realize, okay, I think they are going to get this in. Maybe there'll be a delay. There thankfully never was. And I would say that the atmosphere was electric, and then the rain in the second half, because it was just rain and not lightning, that kind of enhanced the experience as well. So definitely just kind of a roller coaster of the day, not knowing if it was going to happen. And then when it finally did happen, it was just a blast.
The cruel part in all of it was just how perfect it was throughout the day on Friday. Like, I was on campus early that day, walking around, and campus was buzzing. Like, it's always buzzing on a game weekend, but USC, that entire weekend just brings a different kind of energy. Campus was packed at 1 p.m. on Friday afternoon. The sun was out. It was like a perfect fall day. Got to show some people around who had never been to Notre Dame before, and everything was great. Friday night's awesome. Saturday, we wake up. It's even better than the day before. And there's talk about whether or not the game was actually going to be played. I go, I just can't believe this. Like, this is just the worst luck ever. But you're right. There was a weird vibe. I'm actually going to spoil one of the things that I didn't like. The forecast was so ominous, basically, that it did affect my mindset. Like, I was still trying to have a good time, but part of me was like, I don't even know if this game is going to get played. We're basically just tailgating to watch the night games at O'Rourke's. So that was weird. But then the storm really came in. It was dark. It was scary. It was actually a good thing Notre Dame did not move the game up, because if they had started it at 5:30, it absolutely would have been delayed, because it was storming pretty heavily. The rain was coming down. But then after that storm, we realized there was going to be a clean pocket basically from 7:30 to 9 to 9:30. So you're thinking they're going to get the first half in. After that, who knows? And then you're right. The game ends up kind of going off without a hitch. It starts pouring in the second half, but we never have a delay. And now that Notre Dame has won and some time has passed, I think the game is actually more memorable because of the conditions.
100% it is. And I know there's been a couple times in the Coliseum where Notre Dame has played USC in the rain, some good, some not so good. But I don't, top of mind, remember a time in our lifetime where they've had a rainy game against USC at Notre Dame Stadium. So that definitely makes it a little bit more unique. There's some broader questions about why we're having late, October thunderstorms that I'm not equipped to answer. Wasn't too thrilled about that. But I guess the other critical thought is, very rarely do thunderstorms just happen for 5 hours straight, like people weathermen were saying they were going to, and that, of course, did not happen. So weathermen are liars? I don't know. Or is that the theory we're going with? Because they didn't quite nail this one.
They were right about the rain, but the fact that they were not right about the lightning was a giant blessing. And I started to get excited about the actual game for the first real time of that day around 6:30 p.m. when we were starting to head into the stadium, and you realize, okay, this game is actually going to happen. I think that's a good segue into the three things we like, because as we're walking in, you think about the situation. USC is without their top two backs, and yes, USC did come off an impressive win over Michigan when they did look like the more physical team going up against a team and a program that prides itself on its physicality, on winning on the line of scrimmage. But it just felt like Notre Dame was kind of due, especially on the offensive line, and that is one of the main things I liked from this game. It was a much-needed, dominant performance from the O-line. Because, look, I was pretty critical of that unit multiple times last week. I talked about how they have not lived up to their lofty expectations for the preseason, and they had not consistently dominated one opponent all season. Well, that absolutely changed on Saturday night, because they dominated USC's front seven from beginning to end. I mean, they set the tone right away with Jeremiyah Love's first his long touchdown run, then his touchdown run. Joe Adon made his presence felt immediately in his first start. So I could not have been more impressed with the offensive line. You consider the fact that Billy Stroud was playing with the sprained MCL. It just makes it all the more impressive. But Notre Dame finished with 122 rushing yards before contact. Obviously, they have great backs. We're going to talk about them a lot in the show. But considering they had 122 rushing yards before they were even touched by a USC defender, that is a dominant offensive line performance. And it came at the perfect time, because in those types of conditions, you need to lean on your offensive line, and Notre Dame was finally able to in this one.
Yeah, I mean, they were outstanding. There's no doubt about that. And it was really kind of the type of performance that we've been looking for from that group all year. Like you said, couldn't have come in a better spot. And I think it just also speaks to the multiplicity of Notre Dame's offense. USC elected to take the pass away. that was a mistake. Notre Dame just gouged them with the run, similar to the week before where NC State took the run away and then Notre Dame gouged them through the air. I mean, that's the problems that Notre Dame's offense presents, and it becomes even more pronounced when the offensive line is operating like they were on Saturday night.
Yeah, I understood USC's defensive strategy kind of early on when they were playing back because they thought Notre Dame might try to throw over top. But also, when you're going up against two backs like that and then the wind and the rain starts coming and you still can't stop them, I mean, that just shows you how good those two backs are in Notre Dame's backfield right now.
Yeah, and we got to talk about those guys because I think the thing that's going to, besides the weather, stick out the most to me about this game is just now the legacy that Jeremiyah Love and Jadarian Price have established for themselves in the Notre Dame USC rivalry. 2 years in a row, Jeremiyah Love has dominated against USC, and in JD Price's case, you can make the argument he's done it for the last three because last year Jeremiyah Love was on his way to having probably close to 200 yards against the Trojans. He had 137 all-purpose yards and just over half with a touchdown. He goes down in that game, and Price just jumps right in. He has 111 on the ground with a touchdown. I know you talked about some of these numbers on your show today, but I was summing this up on the plane tonight. So Love this year has 265 all-purpose yards with a touchdown. Price has 200 all-purpose yards with 2 touchdowns. So if you sum all that up over the last 2 years, 713 all-purpose yards. And that doesn't take into account Price's kickoff return for 99 yards 2 years ago. I mean, it's just those numbers are preposterous. And you become a legend with great games in this series, and those two have just done that.
Yeah, they have been incredible all season long, and this was their moment. This was their game. And it's funny because going into the season, we all had really high expectations for Love and Price, and we said, yeah, this is probably the best running back tandem in the country. But they have somehow exceeded all of my expectations for them going in. A big part of that is because of Price. Like Jeremiyah Love has been as advertised, but I think it was Pete Sampson who made a reference about how Jaywan Sider told Jeremiyah Love, like, hey, look, you're a great player. You've made some amazing plays. You have these amazing highlights, but there have not been enough times where you are the best player in a big game. And then you start to think about last year, like he's actually right. Like he obviously had that 98-yard touchdown run against Indiana. It's hard to kind of talk about his playoff games because he was clearly limited because of the injury to his knee. But this game, in this moment, they leaned on those two guys from beginning to end, and they both lived up to it and just carried Notre Dame to a victory, and USC never had an answer for either one of them.
And I think the other thing is the two of them are just so explosive. There's really not anything comparative across college football. I know the kid at Mizzou, Hardy's good. There's some other good backs out there, but I mean, these guys are just in a different class all by themselves. And you mentioned the injury. You know, of course, that happened against USC last year in the first place. You got to wonder, I mean, Love was fired up the other night. You got to wonder if that part of the reason he was so fired up is because he feels that those guys last year basically compromised him from being at full strength in the playoff. And now that he had a chance going into this game at full strength, he wanted to take full advantage of it, and he did.
Yeah, he did. And he's always a very competitive guy. He'll talk sometimes, but it always felt like he was not the initiator. Well, in this game, he was initiating the talk, the conversation. When he had that long touchdown that long run to start the game, he immediately does like the first down signal right in the face of 2 USC defenders. I was actually kind of surprised they didn't call a taunting penalty there, just given how referees have been so lax with that this season. They're ready to fire that flag off at any moment. But it was every single play, man. He's talking to him now. In his defense, USC players are like trying to rip his helmet off. They were successful multiple times on that play. They ripped his chain. They're going at his knees. They're doing all this stuff after the play. There's hand fighting. Like it was a very, very chippy game. Fortunately, it didn't end up in anything, too excessive. Like there were no fights. There was not even an unsportsmanlike penalty. And then after the game, there was a moment where it looked like there might be something, but that ended up being a non-situation. So Jeremiyah Love set the tone with his play, but also his words from the very first possession.
He really did. And they needed that. And when we're talking about tone setting, there's two guys on the other side of the ball, another duo I'd also like to talk about because Adon Shuler and Drayk Bowen, took a lot of heat early on after less than stellar performances against Miami and A&M. And both of them have really been pivotal in the defense's turnaround since around that second half of that Purdue game. Shuler in this one was fantastic. He had 10 tackles, TFL, fumble force, and a PBU. He just looks like he's playing so much more fluidly now compared to earlier in the season. I mean, you think back on that CJ Daniels play where should have just taken his soul on that. He didn't. He's doing that now. He's crashing down towards the line. And Bowen, for his number, he had a great game. He had 5 tackles, had a huge hit in coverage on a 4th down early in the game. You think back to that A&M game, of course, it's him in coverage, letting up the game-winning touchdown. And I just think this is a team where there were a lot of questions about leadership, especially early on when they're 0-2. Both of these guys have stepped up, and I think you can see that. Like Notre Dame puts out some videos, and there's Adon Shuler just after every turnover saying, "We're not done yet. We're not done yet." And he's just adamant that they were going to go out there and dominate USC, and these guys have just been a big deal in this turnaround.
There's plenty more to like from this game on Saturday, and Luke and I are going to get back to that in a second. But before we do, here's a word from Monarch. Let's be honest, most of us can't even name all our financial accounts, let alone what they're worth. Between 401ks, savings, and investments, it's easy to lose track, and that can mean leaving money on the table. That's why I started using Monarch, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch helped me organize my accounts, track my spending, and get a better handle on my investments without having to touch a spreadsheet. You can also review everything with your partner, see your shared goals, and make better financial decisions together. Monarch's visual dashboards and smart tools make it so much easier to understand where my money's going and how to make it work harder for me. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarch.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarch.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer that you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love how FanDuel gives me so many ways to play. I've built parlays, tried player props, and even followed the live lines during games. It makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. All right, I'm hesitant to give out a pick because lately the picks I've been giving out on the show have not hit, but I'm going to try again. I'm going to take the Chargers minus 3.5 on Thursday Night Football against the Vikings. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. And I'm glad you brought that up because I noticed that too when I was watching the Irish Axis video that they put out on Monday afternoon. We all understand that Drayk Bowen is a leader. He's got the green dot, right? He's sort of like the captain right there in the middle of the defense. But I never really thought of Adon Shuler as a vocal leader, but it seemed like they were really leaning into that. And you're right. He was the person breaking it down when they're on the field before the game. He's talking to the team. He's talking to the team on the sidelines constantly. And there was a point where Mickens and Shuler are kind of not yelling at Christian Gray, but basically like they're going to keep coming. They're going to keep throwing the ball. They're going to keep throwing it our way. So it's our time to make some plays. And Adon Shuler was like, we got to do this right now. We got to change the game. And he did. He comes up with that forced fumble. Makai Lemon has a couple of tackles for loss. It was a huge game for him. And then Drayk Bowen not only making plays in the run game, but making some critical plays in coverage as well. So just a great turnaround for him after a pretty rough start to the season.
Yeah, and like I said, it's something that Notre Dame just really needed after searching for answers for the first few weeks of the season. And to see these guys kind of come into their own from a leadership perspective and then also play the way that we saw them play in the college football playoff last year, that's just been really refreshing.
So for me, the next two things that I like sort of go hand in hand, and they're going to stay on the defense. I thought Chris Ash's game plan was really good. It did not start out great, but from the first drive you saw, Leonard Moore is lining up at nickel, and he's going to shadow Makai Lemon. We had talked about it in the pregame. Are they actually going to do it? It was something that was thrown around with Devontae Smith out. Well, they did it on the first drive, and it clearly created some confusion for the defense early on because there was that third down where Tanu Kynes, former Notre Dame recruit, by the way, was just wide open, and no one was covering him from the beginning of the play. I was pretty frustrated that Notre Dame did not call a timeout in that moment because it was so early and it's a third down and no one's on a guy in the field. But They were able to figure it out on the fly, which is something that Chris Ash has struggled with this year. Like, he's been a little bit stubborn with his game plan. They have not been able to adjust that well in the game. And then after USC's second possession on offense, they didn't really do anything the rest of the game. And I think that was a great adjustment by Chris Ash. And the fact that Leonard Moore was asked to line up out of position and play press man against one of the best wide receivers in college football is truly just one hell of a task to handle. And he rose to the occasion. When he was guarding Lemon, he was targeted 3 times, gave up 2 catches for 28 yards. That is just extremely impressive stuff. And yeah, USC was able to take advantage of Christian Gray and the holes that were created by this new look defense, but Notre Dame was able to eliminate USC's run game and contain their best player. When you're able to do that, you're going to win way more often than not.
Yeah, and I think it also speaks to just even how much better Moore has gotten since last year, because if you recall, there was all this banter or dialogue going into the national title game. Well, why can't he just follow Jeremiah Smith wherever on the field? And the nuance was explained that that's just not how college cornerbacks work. There's a significant difference between the field and the boundary, and of course the nickel spot. And I don't think anybody really had much of anything to say about that. But now, I mean, the way that he's playing is just, it kind of seems like he can do anything in the defensive backfield. And that is just so rare that you really have to give him credit, but you also have to give Chris Ash credit, because I don't know that a lot of other defensive coordinators would have taken that risk, because if it didn't work, then, oh boy, especially a guy whose seat has been as hot as his has been. I mean, who knows what the chatter's going to be like after that game. So you got to give him some credit as well for recognizing what an elite talent he has in Leonard Moore and making it work for the rest of the defense.
I'd love to know when they started practicing that, or at least preparing to make that adjustment for USC, because I just find it hard to believe that they installed that Sunday after NC State. You know, not that Notre Dame was not going to take NC State or Boise State seriously, but my hunch is that they started preparing for USC weeks in advance, probably realized they were going to need to move that. So I just wonder if Leonard Moore was getting reps at nickel like well beforehand, not just the week leading up. I've not seen anything that's been the case, but I'm guessing they probably started early on. But to your point, it was a risk still, even if you try to prepare for it in advance, but it ended up paying off in a big way.
Yeah, it could have been after Arkansas. Notre Dame had a more favorable schedule after that. And of course, Lemon just had really torn up Illinois the same day that Notre Dame played Arkansas. So maybe it was after that. But yeah, I don't know. It's a good point.
But on the point about the game plan, another key component in that is the way that they use Jalen Sneed. Sneed played 31 of 78 snaps, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it's actually been more than he had been playing in recent games, and he was extremely impactful. I know he had that amazing game last year against Navy where he ended up scoring a touchdown, but I think this was his best game, given the stakes, given the moment. He was tied for third on the team in tackles with 6, had 2 run stops, 2 quarterback pressures according to Pro Football Focus, and he came up big in the biggest plays in the game. Just think about that drive with USC. Just over 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Sneed held up King Miller on a run that they ran on 3rd and down to set up a 4th down attempt. And it looked like he was about to get the first down, but Sneed is able to hold his ground, push him back, which forces a 4th and inches. And then Lincoln Riley decides to run a rollout. Jalen Sneed reads it perfectly, doesn't blitz immediately, waits, realizes what Mayava is doing, sprints at him in the backfield, ends up forcing his throw. It's errant. Notre Dame gets a stop and basically seals the game in that moment. So he made a bunch of big plays in this game, and just I give him so much credit because we've had high expectations for him before, and even this year, like he's been losing some snaps to Matt Framo, but it doesn't seem to bother him. Whenever he is on the field and he is asked to make a big play, it seems like he's been able to come up with it so many more times than not, especially as of late. He had a slow start to the year, but he's really come on, and this is a huge piece for the Notre Dame defense because they can't always get pressure, but Sneed can. If they use him right, he's going to get pressure a lot.
Yeah, and it kind of reminded me on that 4th down play, the way that they used him last year against Penn State on the crucial pick that Aller threw right into Christian Gray's hands, where he kind of showed some late pressure too. But I think the thing that's also speaks to just how engaged he is, and maybe this surprised me a little bit too, was him talking after the game about like, yeah, this game meant way more to me than others do. Like, this is a huge rivalry. And I guess I had wondered for a number of years, like, what do players really think about this? Like, how much do they really care about this game? And you see what he says the other night, and more importantly, you see the way the two teams were talking to each other, or talking at each other, I should say, the other night. It's clear they care a lot about this thing, and that's where I kind of want to wrap this from what I like perspective. There are very few things that bring out as much joy for me as just beating USC. We talked about this a bunch of times, for a decade basically of growing up. I thought Notre Dame might never beat USC. And when they beat them for the first time in 2010 and, whatever it was, 8 years, 9 years, I think it was actually, that was a watershed moment, even though both those teams sucked, right? But now,
that was another rain game. Now that I think about it, it was an
Yep.
ugly game.
Yes, but as the clock's ticking down, Luke Talich picks that ball off. Notre Dame's taking a knee. I'm just smiling ear to ear, and really, like, the rain at that point, it's even more, makes it the whole thing more enjoyable, and it just feels so good knowing Notre Dame had beaten the Trojans. And there haven't honestly been a ton of instances where the game has had stakes like this for both teams. And, I know everything's still kind of ahead of USC. I'm not sure that they're going to be a college football playoff team. They might lose a game or two more, but I do think that's a pretty good USC team. And there just haven't been a lot of games like that. So that was just really, really enjoyable.
It was much more satisfying this year than it's been in a long time. Like last year, it was great when Notre Dame beat USC to clinch the playoff. But in that instance, it wasn't as much about beating USC as much as it was about the fact that they had made it to the college football playoff. USC was just kind of like the next team in the way. And that team was much worse than this team right now. So you think back to like 2017, that was great because Notre Dame just smoked them. 2015, but they didn't have the stakes like this one because this was an elimination game. It was so chippy from start to finish. All the uncertainty about the future, the Chad Bowen thing, like there was just so much more going into it. And I'm with you. I was getting so frustrated at the end when Notre Dame just couldn't really put it away. Like they had so many chances to really run away with it. And the fact that USC was still just hanging around, like when Luke Talich finally got that interception, I finally smiled for the first time in a long time and could really just enjoy the moment and realize that it was over because there was still just a fighting chance for USC. But once Talich made that play, and his third interception on the year, by the way, finally could let out a big sigh of relief and start celebrating.
Yeah, and then, you see Lincoln Riley running off the field with his tail tucked between his legs, like the coward he is. That just makes it all the more better. So definitely enjoyed that one.
Did you see the handshake? Because I've seen some people say that Lincoln Riley just dipped immediately. I'm pretty sure he shook Marcus's hand. I feel like if he didn't, it'd be a much bigger deal and everyone would be talking about it.
It would probably be a much bigger deal if he didn't. I didn't see it, but yeah, I have no idea. It sounds better to me if he didn't. It seems more on brand with his character if he didn't. I'm just kidding, but not really. Anyways, but yeah, you're probably right.
Before Luke and I break down the rest of the things that we didn't like from the game, I want to tell you about Game Time. College football is back, and I could not be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real, actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. It is the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. I pulled up Game Time, and in just a couple taps, I saw amazing deals. I'm talking about your favorite college football games for as low as $25. The app made it super simple. I could even see the exact view from my seat before buying. I love the zone deals too. You pick the section, Game Time picks the seats, and you save big. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. All right, now I want to switch over to the things that we didn't like because, like I was just saying, this game was still in doubt very late in the game, and it probably shouldn't have been. I mean, Notre Dame had a chance to go up 21-10 earlier in the game, and they weren't able to capitalize in that moment. And it felt like whenever they'd make some great plays and it felt like they were about to pull away, they'd also commit just some really dumb self-inflicted mistake, or they just shank a 31-yard field goal. So what stood out to you the most about what you didn't like and what they need to improve upon going forward?
I would say the red zone play calling, because while there is no doubt that CJ Carr's interception was one of the worst, most inexcusable interceptions I have ever seen, just could never happen. What is equally inexcusable is that Mike Denbrock and this offensive staff keep putting him in these spots. We saw it against NC State, rolling him out on fourth down. Like, he's clearly not comfortable in that. And you have the two best running backs in the country. It just didn't make any sense to me why Notre Dame didn't attempt to run the ball with goal to go, especially against that defense. They're dominating them all night. And I'd ask the same about the drive where Burnett eventually missed a field goal. And missing it is actually generous. He shanked that thing. But you have the two best running backs in the country. You have 2 plays to get 2 yards. Just give it to them. But thankfully now they have 2 weeks to figure out a better plan moving forward, because yeah, I mean, that should probably be like a 3-score game, if we're being honest. And that was one of the things, like, early on when they don't score to go up 21-10, the extra point thing happens. I'm starting to think like, I've seen this before, where like you have opportunities to extend it to 2 scores and you can't do it. You let a team hang around. We've seen what happens. I mean, that's why Notre Dame has one of its losses this year.
That's true. It was really frustrating. We're going to talk about the kicking situation in a second, but what do you take away from Carr's performance? This isn't necessarily one of the things that we didn't like, and to me, that means you weren't as down on it as maybe some other people are, because look, it was frustrating. I think he was a little spooked early on, but I don't think that this is a sign of things to come. Do you?
No. I think he came out a little bit too amped up, and that's probably why he missed some throws. But honestly, in the second half, I mean, that first drive, which was a great drive for 7.5 minutes, whatever it was, they go down and score. He was great on that drive. He was 4 for 5, delivers a great touchdown ball to Will Pauling. They really didn't need him to throw much after that point. So, if they had asked him to do that, I kind of feel like he would have had a better game in that second half, honestly, just because he looked good in that second drive, but he didn't need to be, because those 2 backs just weren't getting stopped.
I'm with you. I understand that people are a little bit disappointed. And look, I was hyping him up too, and I felt like, maybe if the conditions were more fair and he had a chance to air it out some, it could have been a potential Heisman moment for him. But look, they didn't need him to do that. He's a young quarterback making his 7th start. It was a big game. And in the second half, when they really needed him, he came through. But you know who did not come through? That would be the entire kicking operation for Notre Dame. As I pointed out yesterday, it's not just field goal kicking. They can't kick off. Like, how can Notre Dame be so dynamic in every aspect of special teams except arguably the most important one? It doesn't make any sense to me. They can't kick it off in bounds. They can't make a chip shot field goal. They've now missed 2 extra points on the year, both in critical situations too. I just don't understand how we're in year 2 of this, and this isn't necessarily an indictment on Marty Biaggi, because it seems like they've been dealing with some injuries, but it is extremely frustrating. The one bright spot in the kicking situation is that James Rendell is him.
Yeah, he's I saw he's like a Ray Guy finalist actually this year too. So good for him, because that was somebody that I was very concerned about for really 2 years now, and he's just been a stud. I've been in on that train for a number of weeks now. But and as far as the kickoff is concerned, it's like when you're playing a video game and, like, I don't know if there's like as high as possible winds that are just blowing to the left, because he kicks it out of bounds to the left every time. So maybe he needs to aim just like way to the right, and then he'll just kick it to the middle, the back of the end zone. It won't be a problem. I don't know. I'm not a kicking guru, but holy cow, like, dude, you got to stop putting the ball out of bounds.
That's kind of how I approach my drive when I golf, except instead of going right to left, I line up so far to the left that people are like, are you sure? Should we alert the people on the hole next to us that they're in danger? I'm like, no, don't worry. This is going to bend around. Yeah. It's extremely frustrating.
And I will say also, like, people made the comment that the other night looked like a 2024 type game with Notre Dame just punishing people and playing good defense, running the ball. I'd agree it did too, because they also cannot kick a field goal. And that's exactly what most of last season looked like.
Yeah, I don't really understand it. I'm hoping that it just has to do with Noah Burnett's injury. I will give him some slack, not entirely, but I felt like he should have gotten a redo on that one missed extra point, because USC was timing the snap, and I think he jumped early. But still, make the extra point, man. It's really not that hard. And even in those conditions, like the fact that Notre Dame had the ball and it would have been a 45-yard field goal to go up 13 points late in the game, they couldn't even consider it. So they just had to chuck it up in the end zone, is just not what you want in this moment, in this situation. I thought they would need a kicker to come through late in the game. Fortunately, they needed him. He didn't make it, and they still ended up winning. So you would think that with the bye week and then who Notre Dame has left on the schedule, they should have time to get it figured out. But at this point, I'm not super confident they will.
Yeah, and again, it may not matter until the playoffs, just like it did last year. But they may need to fly Dr. Jeter in again to work on this guy's hip because, yeah, it's ugly right now.
Another thing that was ugly from this game, I guess we have to call it the Christian Gray experience. Do you remember years ago when we had the Ian Book experience?
I do, but that was somewhat, I remember more pronounced the Jonathan Doerer experience.
Yeah, the Jonathan Doerer experience was something. I would kill for Jonathan Doerer right now. But the Ian Book experience was sort of like a joke because we were both big fans of his, but he did make a couple decisions every game that really made you scratch your head. But the Christian Gray experience is on a whole nother level right now. And look, I love his mental toughness. I love his resiliency. But it would be better for everyone involved if this was not such a common occurrence. And he was playing great the previous two games. Like, I gave him a lot of love after the NC State game, but USC made a point to throw at him a lot. They targeted him 15 times, technically 16 if you count the 2-point conversion. He allowed 8 catches for 179 yards. One of the 7 incompletions was a drop. He had 3 coverage penalties. He gave up 1 touchdown, 2-point conversion, and 7 first downs. But he did make that huge interception late in the third quarter. He nearly had another one late to clinch the game. He had a pass breakup and a tackle for loss as well. So I'm giving him credit for bouncing back, but still, it can never be that bad. I understand he's going to get a lot of action when he's out in the field, but that was just rough. It was painful to watch early on, and I'm glad he was able to bounce back because otherwise we're talking about that as like one of the worst games we've ever seen from a Notre Dame corner.
Yeah, this is an interesting one because live, I didn't realize kind of just how many catches and yards he had let up. Obviously, there were some loud misses like the Jacoby Lane 66-yard touchdown play. And that's what he tends to do is have loud misses. But I had some people ask me like after the game, like, what do we think about this guy? And I'm like, I think he's a good player. He just has some loud misses. But then when you look at the stats and then listen to some other people like suggest maybe is he hurt? Like he doesn't look like he's moving well out there. I don't know. But what I will say is that he fights. Like there's no doubt about that. But I think he might drive the coaches a little bit crazy, and probably his teammates, because like I think Pete Sampson was talking about this when he started asking him a question about Christian Gray, and like Freeman under his breath is like, God damn, like, he's just like, I don't know what to say about this guy. I think he probably drives him nuts, and he would be a hard guy to coach, and I get that because you see him on the sidelines, like he looks kind of possessed. He's always screaming at himself at times too. Like I just think he's a little bit extra. That's the best way I can describe it.
Freeman is so good in those press conferences at not giving away any of those emotions. So the fact that he did kind of give that off, again, it was subtle, but it still shows you. And he even said that he went up to Gray and said, no one feels sympathy for you. You're going to have to just figure this out. Christian Gray went back at him. It's like, that's great, but it would also be great too if you didn't get beat that consistently. And the fact that USC's whole game plan was just like, we're going to throw in Six's direction is not a good sign. He's basically the James Franklin of cornerbacks. He's going to be great against all the lesser teams, but against the best teams, he just continues to fail over and over and over again. Again, I'm giving him credit for bouncing back, but it's starting to become a pattern now. I thought he would get better at it this year, and honestly, this game is much worse than any of his bad moments last season.
Yeah. It might be. I guess the question I would ask is like, just I don't know how many teams out there. I mean, nobody at Notre Dame is going to play the rest of the way. He's not going to be tested again. So, if something happens later in the year, then maybe we'll see something then. But I don't know that they're going to see a quarterback as good as Jadarian again either. That's the other thing. But yeah, it's a good point. He definitely needs to shore that up. I just don't know that we can assume that that's going to happen at this point.
That's true. And for the record, I'm not calling for him to be benched or anything like that, but we spent a lot of time on Christian Gray. What's the next thing you didn't like?
Jeremiah loves helmet. What's going on with that? I've been talking about this a bunch. Either this thing needs to be just bolted in like Rico Dowdle style, where he just has it like just strapped all the way up, or Freeman really needs to make a point about getting into the officials' ears about him getting his helmet ripped off, because that has definitely happened a number of times. But I feel like it shouldn't come off this easily. I don't know.
It was an issue against A&M. They were trying to rip it off. And I think Rick Kimbrell from Irish Sports Daily, I saw some Irish Sports Daily guys post a couple pictures where you could see them like fully like gripping underneath, like around his ear area. And I think, when you're sweating and he's got that skull cap on, when that's wet, it's very slick, so it can come right off. But yeah, there's also a couple plays too where he's running down the field and he hasn't even buckled in his chin strap. So I don't understand why that's a thing. I also don't understand. This is like one of my few old man takes when it comes to football. It really bothers me when guys run around and they have their mouthpiece just dangling from their face mask and it's not in their mouth. It's like, what's the point? It doesn't look cool. And also, like, why wouldn't you want to bite down and brace yourself for a hit? I don't know. But yeah, a couple things that I think are fashion decisions, but they should just figure it out.
Yeah, no doubt. So use the bye week to figure that one out.
I already spoiled my last thing. It was the forecast and how it impacted the tailgates. But that's pretty much it for me on the things that I didn't like. You got any more?
So I said this in jest somewhat last week, but Notre Dame has an offensive line injury problem. And maybe it's just the law of averages after years of being pretty fortunate on the injury front. Maybe these are all freak occurrences, but in any event, this is a problem with the news that Billy Schrouth is going to miss some extended time today too. I know I saw 3 to 4 weeks. I think it's going to be longer than that, honestly. And it's just a problem you can extend to the other side of the ball too, with Gabe Rubio now potentially done for the rest of the regular season. And last year that happened with Mills, and then Cross missed a bunch of time. Boubacar, Patelho. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on up there, and again, these could all be freak occurrences, but I would like these to stop.
Just think about it. Notre Dame is down arguably. Actually, it might not even be arguable. Their top 3 best offensive linemen. Charles Jagsaw, potentially a future first-round draft pick, breaks his arm in an ATV accident in the summer. Then Ashton Craig tears his ACL on a play that I didn't even notice that he got hurt, and he was walking around the sideline. Nope, he's gone for this year after he just missed last season. Now you got Billy Schrouth, who is an absolute warrior, a dog for playing through that. He now has a sprained MCL. And then you think back to last year. Ashton Craig, torn ACL. Charles Jagsaw, torn pec. Billy Schrouth had a really high ankle sprain that held him out for a few games. And then they had Rocco Spindler dealing with an injury at the end of the year. Anthony Knapp got hurt against Penn State. Like, you run down the list, and it is excessive. It is a very violent, physical position. But it's so weird going through this now when it felt like throughout the entire Harry Hiestand era, there was one injury, and that was to Alex Bars, and it basically wiped out that season. But now it's just like every single week, man, there's something new.
Yeah. Again, like maybe it's just law of averages. I mean, you could say the ATV thing this year with Jag you saw is a freak occurrence. Last year, maybe not so much, getting hurt with the pec thing in practice, but I'm just sick of seeing it. So that's where I'm at on that.
Yeah, I'm also sick of the injuries happening in practice. I don't know what happened with Gabriel Rubio, but it is really unfortunate that a serious elbow injury happened in practice again. I don't know what happened. You can't prevent everything, especially if you want to have physical practices before what will be a physical game, but that's just really unfortunate.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right, what are you going to be doing during the bye week here? Because I know it's cliche to say the bye week came at a good time, but I actually am looking forward to a Saturday where I can relax a little bit.
Yeah, I haven't had a free weekend in Chicago. I don't know, man, since the first bye week. So when was that? Like 7 weeks ago? It's been a minute. So once I get back from New York after this work trip, definitely looking forward to that. There's a couple games that are interesting, nothing super interesting, but that probably means it could be a chaotic week, because that seems to be what happens when there isn't just like a wild lineup on the slate. So we'll see what happens.
All right. Well, on that note, we will have you back here next week following what I expect will be a chaotic weekend in college football. And next weekend, who knows? We'll figure something out. Maybe we'll have a new gimmick, or we'll just kind of talk about where the Irish are at midseason. But either way, looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Let's do it.
That is going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Irish. Thank you so much for tuning in and making this your first watch or listen of the day. If you have not already, make sure to subscribe on YouTube, like the video, and leave a 5-star rating and review wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps us grow. Also wanted to remind you, we are still doing the mailbag on Friday, so be sure to submit your questions in the YouTube comments or send them to me on X at Locked On Irish or on Instagram at Locked On Irish Pod. I'm going to be back here tomorrow morning with a special guest to recap Notre Dame's massive recruiting weekend. The Irish really struck gold this weekend. They had a bunch of top targets in attendance, and by all accounts, things went really, really well. Find out more about it tomorrow. I'll see you then.